There are 4 parts of us. All right. Have you ever heard the saying that what you see is what you get in a person? Well, if you have been alive for more than a handful of years, there's a pretty good chance you've come to acknowledge that that most certainly is not the case. Life has this habit, doesn't it, sometimes of throwing us curveballs. And 9 times out of 10, every time we receive a curveball has been because of another person, a relationship that we have in some area of our life. So, if you think about the people in your life whom you are most comfortable with, you might have a picture inside of your mind of one or two people, a family member, a best friend, a sibling, something like that. Think about the parts of you that this other person knows. There's a pretty good chance there's not going to be any judgment going on in the relationship because no one likes being judged. We understand that there's no room for discrimination or harsh, unfair judgment in any healthy relationship. So in order for two people to connect, first and foremost, there needs to be a level of attraction on some level. And by this, I mean that people are able just to simply accept what they see on a very superficial, shallow level. All right. Now, obviously, relationships have to go deeper than that if they are to stand the test of time. So you've got to understand that when we first meet a person, there's going to be parts of us that are known to ourselves, i.e., our preferences, our likes, what makes us tick, our standards, what we are willing to tolerate, what we are willing to accept, and what we're not. And then there's going to be what's known to others. All right. So when two people get together, both parties are going to be coming and arriving at a decision at some point as to whether the relationship goes any further or whether it doesn't. Now that's pretty much just a start. All right. Without some level of attraction or an initial element of trust in a relationship, the relationship's going to go no further. Now, what's true for our personal, social, intimate, private relationships is also true for our professional relationships in a counselling professional context. All right. So you've got to understand that when it comes to advancing and growing and strengthening or deepening our relationships, the quality of our relationships is always going to be determined by the depth of trust in the relationship. Now, when it comes to us being trusted by other people, you've got to understand there's always going to be a number of factors that come into play. All right. Yes, granted, there's always going to be what people can see at face value. And if we think back to that iceberg model earlier on, people are going to be making decisions about whether they like us, whether they don't, based upon what we say, upon what we wear, what we eat, our habits, how we conduct ourselves, our accent, our slangs, things like that, all right, on a very superficial surface level. So, if a relationship can go beyond surface level, what over time people are going to be looking to and evaluating is they want to establish what it is they don't know about us. And this is when two people start asking each other questions about their past. You know, when perhaps you've been friends with someone for a couple of years and you just begin to identify a pattern or a habit. Perhaps you might say something every now and again, and you've identified that they just habitually respond in a similar way every single time. Might be anger, or they might snap at you, or something like that. Once the relationship has developed a level of trust, it might be the case that you or they then start questioning, listen, I've just noticed that, every time I mention your mum or your dad or your ex-boyfriend or your dead cat or your education, you get a little bit touchy. Listen, I'd just be interested in finding out more. Something like that. Now, you've got to understand, because we are all experts of our own lives, 9 times out of 10, we all know our history, all right? I'm not saying that we're all able to effectively structure our history in a chronological order that makes sense to us. Just 9 times out of 10, all of our life events kind of get thrown into this big sack. Sometimes this big sack just becomes a real mess where we know all of our past experiences, we know the reasons why we are the way that we are, but we've never really taken time to reflect and consider why it is that we respond to the things that we do in the way that we do sometimes. And this is where, generally, as human beings, we grow better in company than what we do on our own. Have you ever heard the saying that iron sharpens iron? So, you've got to understand that whilst relationships have the capacity and the potential to tear people down, destructive ones, healthy, strong, balanced and grounded relationships where two people are genuinely interested in each other have the capacity and the potential to build people back up. So yes, hurt people. But if people then are able to reach a stage where they understand and have made peace with their hurts, they become stronger and then able to help other people through theirs. All right. So we all have the capacity and the potential in us to create a lasting legacy in the world if we so choose to go down that direction. But you've got to understand, right? We're not always going to be 100% completely forthcoming with ourselves, especially if we don't know what it is we can trust people for and with. So whilst there's always going to be elements of us that we don't mind being open about, there's always going to be elements of us that are going to remain hidden until those other people in our lives have proved to us that they're worthy of our trust. Now, what's true for us is true for all these other people in our lives. So, the question that you might be asking right now is, okay, so how is it then that we could win the trust of those other people in our lives? Well, this is actually a very, very simple process. Well, it's simple to communicate, a little bit more challenging to actually carry out and apply. It's one of the core communication skills, one of the core conditions of a healthy, balanced relationship that I'm going to place quite a lot of emphasis on, and this is through self-disclosure. And once a person is fully committed to a certain course of action, it becomes very, very challenging to then steer them away. For example, when a person wants to make a change in their life, perhaps someone's going to come to you at some point in the future for counselling, right? They've decided that the quality of their relationships is no longer acceptable in their lives. For example, this person might have been very, very quick to judge for anything up to a lifetime. They might have been very, very closed, very, very opinionated, where their point of view is the main point of view. Then they might wake up one morning, assess and evaluate the caliber and the quality of their relationships and just say, you know what? I'm lonely. I have worked with quite a number of people, elderly people. When I say elderly people, people in their perhaps late 40s, 50s, even in their early 60s, reach a stage of life where they have frittered away and completely squandered all of their relationships for the purpose of being right. Have you ever had a conversation with someone, when one person is so completely hell-bent on vocalizing their point of view, that all other perspectives, all other points of view are completely irrelevant in their eyes? They don't care about what you've got to say. All they care about is being heard, being understood, and fundamentally about them being right. Well, again, this is not an effective way of winning friends and positively influencing people. And guess what we're talking about here is that we all have blind spots, don't we? In the same way that there's elements and parts of us that we cannot see, all right, there's parts of other people that we can see that they cannot see. And this is where, as human beings, we're always going to be better together. Two people working together on a project are always going to be far more effective than one person working alone, right? When one person's climbing a mountain, all they can see is what's directly in front of them. Yes, granted, they know where they've come from, so they know their past experiences and so on and so forth, but they don't know whether they're on the most effective path or not unless they compare their notes and their experiences with the experiences and the reflections of other people. You with me? How would you know that you're currently taking the right path in life unless you were comparing the path that you're taking to other people? Now, it's not necessarily going to be the case that we can just compare the path that we are taking in life to the paths of other people and just say, right, that's it, we are taking the right path, they're taking the wrong path. It's not about that. It's more about us kind of finding this natural flow. Sometimes we'll end up in one path to the extreme left, and then we see someone else doing something slightly different, so we then move extreme right, and life is all about finding balance. And in finding this balance is where many people come unstuck and experience what's commonly referred to as crisis in life. When a person isn't crystal clear on the practical next steps that they need to take to get closer to wherever it is that they want to be in life, They're going to experience all these negative, destructive, intense emotions such as anxiety about their future, perhaps depression, sadness in relation to the things that they've lost or left behind, stress, uncertainty in the present, guilt, shame, that perhaps maybe have entered into a place of beating themselves up because of an unwise couple of steps that they might have taken on their journey. And this framework is about how it is that we can more effectively relate to and work with those other people in our lives. Now you've got to understand that not everyone you meet is going to get this stuff, which means that you can just simply lead by example. So, we understand now, hopefully, that if you have a relationship in your life right now, if you've even bought into me, it's going to be partially to do with what it is that I've disclosed of myself. So this is the Johari window, all right? At any given moment in time, there's what we know of ourselves, all right, that's either going to be available for others that we don't mind showing, or there's those parts of ourselves which are going to be hidden, all right? But then there's those parts of ourselves that we're completely blind to, all right? Let's just talk metaphorically here, right? I cannot see the back of my head. All right, so what I cannot see in life is anyone else's perspective other than my own, which means, it goes without saying, that when I'm conversing or interacting with anyone, either in a personal, professional, social, intimate context, all I can ever relate another person's words and communications to are my own experiences. Every of your life experiences are always going to be in my blind spot. I'm not going to know. And also bear in mind, because I've been influenced by culture, my family upbringing, my past hurts, my successes, my failures, I've got all this stuff in my bag, in my sack that I'm carrying around, and sometimes I'm not going to have made a connection as to why it is that I respond a certain way or communicate in a certain way. And this is where we learn to cut each other a little bit of slack and extend some grace.